the restrictions on the financial assistance, which impacts the work of the state. Mr. President, please allow me to now underscore the inconsistencies in the report. There's a wealth of information, and it has correct information, others erroneous, and some are unfair. And we need to bear this in mind as we near the 2023. Okay, the violations of freedom of movement of MINUSCA and the restrictions, continued restrictions on night flights. What is being asked here is that the procedures of providing the notification is being abided by. The freedom of movement cannot be done at the expense of the security situation in the country. When we see a non-authorized equipment arrive in the country through MINUSCA, we have to react. We cannot be as simple spectators of what happens in my country. We have to ensure the security in my country and of our people. Well, we must react when we find weapons in trucks which are not properly labeled, that we do not know the list of countries who are asked to help. And are we to just stay there and be surprised? And does it mean that when we have an electricity shortage in our airports, is it the same as saying that there are restrictions over night flights? And especially when we make that information clear to all parties. Should we accept that Central African Republic can only has exemptions because of the goodwill of some countries? How can we, under these conditions, build what we're trying to achieve? Mr. President, similarly, we are asked to abide with the SOFA provisions. Yes, but we're asking that our sovereignty be respected. There is a phrase by Nelson Mandela who says our fundamental rights have to do with our basic humanity. It is important, therefore, to show impartiality in our common work and make sure that some violations are not tolerated. This attitude imperils the accomplishments we've already achieved. Please also allow me to, Mr. President, to react to the speeches made here on the illicit weapons that we have been denouncing for months. So let me just clarify the most recent incident, which resulted in 3 deaths of Bangladeshi peacekeepers. This resulted from mines laid by an armed group, and then a patrol vehicle encountered that, and 3 people lost their lives, very quickly transported to the capital. In addition, this is yet another incident which confirms the plea of my government, which says that we have to work together, regardless of the political differences, in the face of the precarious situation of our people and the violations of human rights by consistent violence which comes from armed groups. We have to also equally work together on the issue on the source of funding which feed the armed groups. Let's not use the vulnerability of my country in order to accuse us indiscriminately. We pay tribute to the peacekeepers who lost their lives in my country, but I would also ask you, please, to pay tribute to my Central African brothers and sisters who lost their lives and who continue falling. And We had recently a 16-year-old girl who died from violence in a blue helmet vehicle. Let's work together to restore peace in Central African Republic. Let's work together to find rapid solutions to the fate of our people who are aware that they are a victim of their geostrategic position and the fact that there is so much wealth in the subsoil. Mr. President, on the issue of violations, it's important that you hear our voice. We have to break the pathways where some violations are tolerated and others are used. We have to avoid losing this sense of human rights by promoting a world where some people have rights over others. So once again, I'm asking the Security Council about the reality of war, whatever the qualification that is being given to its propagator, terrorist, a criminal. A criminal is always a criminal. Of course, there are things which are similar or not, but in my country, there are human beings who hope to see, well, not peace because it seems to be unattainable, but they hope for at least stability. Stability which allowed other countries to have conditions which were conducive to building lives and quiet in their countries. We're quite capable of that. But that's what we're trying to get, not to, without polarizing and politicizing everything. Politics is not talking the place of people, but placing them at the heart of what you do. Mr. President, I would like to call for making sure that we do not confuse the need to provide assistance and the missions who should be in line with purposes and principles of the Charter. I would like here to thank our multilateral and bilateral partners who help my country as we're trying to get out of the crisis. And in particular, I would like to yet once again thank the Special Representative of the Secretary General and encourage her to continue with the efforts initiated and work for a mission which is more adapted to our context to finally bring in the peace that we look for so much internationally and keep the stability in the Central African Republic. Time needs to be used in our favor because the longer the violence continues, the more it becomes entrenched. The message of hate and defamation is something that we all confront, but we also need to be impartial, and we need to help the government explaining the goals and objectives. Violence feeds violence, and that is why today, more than ever, we need to fight collectively against the forces of evil and the reasons for the crisis in my country, and that is the armed groups. And not to dwell far too much on the consequences, let's go for the source first. We can count the consequences of the crime, but yes, but let's be more specific. If we're looking for the scapegoats now because of our list and sanctions, this doesn't make us more effective, and it does not help us get to lasting peace. Quite to the contrary, it would mean that we have to review the mandate of the groups of experts. And we are talking about the interdiction of to move, but the armed groups, for example, are moving all over. We're talking about the Kimberley process, but the illicit trafficking continues in the areas where the rebels are. The embargo on the car is always there, so there's a great deal of ambiguity there. So when from that you move on to human rights, you have to remember what the primary starting point was. It is necessary to review our document to be more consistent, more credible, and more effective. Of course, we can work on the consequences of a conflict which lasted for far too long. Let's work in a manner that's responsible together, and let's work together and be pragmatic. On the causes of suffering of the people that has suffering from crimes for decades, the fragile situation of our country did not start in 2020 or 2022. It dates from the time when we asked for bilateral assistance, but even earlier than that. It comes from the time when the Seleka in 2013 and later by other armed groups who came into my country and attacked it. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Council, I recommend, therefore, that the renewal of the mandate of MINUSCA takes into account the recommendations that were voiced here in S 2096 in 2013, which states in its Article 3, it is necessary to reaffirm the will to continue deepening the thought on how to build peace when the mandate in peacekeeping operations is organized, and states that the Secretariat has to organize this by fixing specific objectives to it. And Article 4, it states that we need to specify the difficulties in building peace, in creating peace-building missions, thanks to the integrated missions of evaluation and strategic planning, so as to consistently bring together restoring peace, peace-building, consolidation, and development, so that at the end, our action be completely effective. In Article 7, it says that each mandate of peacekeeping has to be in line with the situation of the country in question. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, some reminders here that the person who is suffering is waiting for cure. I thank you.
Madame Baipo Temon.
I thank Madame Baipo Temon for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Rwanda.
Mr. President, let me start by congratulating Gabo on the presidency of the UN Security Council for this month of October, and the way you comprehensively covered issues on the African continent during your period. I would also like to thank the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ambassador Valentine Rugariza, for her comprehensive briefing that we had this morning, and thank the Foreign Minister of the Central African Republic for her statement. Rwanda pays tribute to the Bangladesh peacekeepers who lost their lives while serving the United Nations. The lives lost are a reminder that the question of the safety and security of peacekeepers should be viewed from a mission perspective. Justice for crimes committed against peacekeepers should be given the weight it deserves. Mr. President, Rwanda commends the government of the Central African Republic under His Excellency President Touadera and welcomes the commitment demonstrated to implement the ICGLR joint roadmap facilitated by Rwanda and Angola. We reaffirm our commitment to strengthening our partnership with Central African Republic authorities to build sustainable peace. We call on partners and the international community to support Central African Republic, sustain and scale up the gains achieved this far. Mr. President, though challenges still exist, good progress has been registered on several fronts, including implementing the aforementioned ICGLR Joint Roadmap, DDRR, and extension of the state presence in the Central African Republic. In this regard, Rwanda appreciates MINUSCA's role in facilitating this achievement in partnership with the Central African Republic authorities. Rwanda, as a top troop and police contributor to MINUSCA, and as a bilateral partner at the Central African Republic, attests that bilateral military intervention can complement the work of the United Nations to restore peace and create a suitable environment for the peace process. Troops deployed under bilateral arrangement between Rwanda and the Central African Republic are mandated to work in partnership with the government forces within pre-identified areas of operation in coordination with MINUSCA forces. We appreciate the efforts of the Central African Republic government in fighting misinformation and disinformation on peacekeepers and bilateral forces. The international community must assist Central African Republic in fighting misinformation, targeting the government, peacekeepers, and bilateral partners. When misinformation spreads, the public loses trust in government and UN mission. Mr. President, sustainable peace can only be attained through the constructive participation of the people of the Central African Republic. We must allow them to develop their homegrown solutions organically. In this regard, peace operations and bilateral support create space and time for the peace process and establishment of the state and democratic institutions. In this respect, we welcome the progress made thus far. Rwanda will continue to cooperate with the Central African Republic government and other partners, including regional and sub-regional partners, in support of Central African homegrown solutions suitable to their local context. Mr. President, disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and repatriation are crucial aspects necessary to ensure lasting peace. The uncontrolled proliferation of arms threatens peace and security in the Central African Republic. We are encouraged by the cooperation between national authority and MINUSCA in this regard, which resulted in a collection of 255 weapons, 11,738 rounds of ammunition, 12 grenades, 22 rockets, and 13 rocket launchers. DDRR is a long-term undertaking that requires sustainable funding. In this regard, we urge partners to support Central African Republic in implementing the DDRR program and the capacity building associated with the process. DDRR needs to be accompanied by security sector reform to transform the security and justice institutions, to create a secure and stable environment, and to enable economic development. Security sector reform programs should be resourced and Central African Republic supported to allow economic growth as the country moves in this direction. The Secretary General's report highlighted positive progress in extending state authority presence in the Central African Republic. We believe that the state authorities will enhance confidence building and essential service delivery to people, which is an integral part of the peace-building process. Mr. President, finally, complementarity in peace operations has proven to make a positive difference. Though under different arrangements, deployments of bilateral forces in the Central African Republic played a reinforcement role at the time of need. We hope that MINUSCA, Central African authorities, and other partners will capitalize on this momentum to build sustainable peace. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Rwanda for that statement. There are no more names on the list of speakers. I will now adjourn the meeting so that the Council